Four plants are growing across the world right now. One contains 64% omega-3 fatty acids, more than any fish, more than any seed. One builds bones faster than milk, with more calcium and zero inflammation. One produces complete protein with all 9 essential amino acids in soil where nothing else survives. And one regrows brain cells in 14 days. Western science ignored all of them. By the end of this video, you will know all 4 and why it is hidden from you. Walk into any Korean restaurant tonight. Watch the table next to you. They will wrap grilled meat in large green leaves with serrated edges and purple undersides. This is not lettuce. This is not spinach. This is perilla, and 500 million people across Asia eat it every single week. In Japan, they call it shiso. Every piece of sashimi arrives with a perilla leaf underneath. Tourists assume it is decoration. It is not. The leaf contains compounds that kill bacteria and parasites. Japanese chefs have known this for 500 years. The leaf is not garnish. It is medicine hiding in plain sight. In China, they call it zai su. Traditional medicine cabinets contain dried perilla for treating 40 different conditions: coughs, colds, nausea, skin inflammation, allergic reactions. The documentation fills thousands of pages in text that Western researchers never translated. Here is the first clue that something went wrong. You know basil, you know oregano, you know mint and rosemary and thyme. These herbs sit in every Western grocery store, but perilla, consumed by more people than all those herbs combined, does not exist in Western consciousness. Most Americans have never heard the word. The problem begins with names. Koreans call it kayanip, Japanese call it shiso, Chinese call it zisu, botanists call it perilla frutescens. 4 names for one plant. No unified identity in Western languages. When a plant has no consistent name, it has no consistent presence in databases, cookbooks, or research funding. The fragmentation was not intentional, but the result was erasure. Compare this to cilantro. Same plant as coriander, different name for leaves versus seeds. But Western food culture unified these names. Everyone knows cilantro. It appears in every grocery store. Perilla never received this unification. It remained foreign in each separate encounter, never familiar, never integrated, never understood. The ancient record tells a different story. In China, around 200 AD, scholars compiled the Shenong Bencao Jing. This is the oldest surviving pharmacopoeia in human history. Perilla appears in its pages. The text describes using the leaves for respiratory ailments and the seeds for digestive problems. 2,000 years ago, Chinese physicians understood this plant's value. In Korea, a royal physician named Heo-jun spent 15 years writing the Donggibogam. He finished in 1613. This encyclopedia of Korean medicine documented 17 distinct uses for perilla: treating coughs, calming nausea, reducing inflammation, promoting digestion. The book became Korea's most important medical text. It guided physicians for 4 centuries. Yet Western scholars did not translate it until 1999. 386 years of medical knowledge locked behind a language barrier. In Japan during the Edo period, which lasted from 1603 to 1868, perilla cultivation reached 90% of farming households. Families grew it for food, medicine, and lamp oil. Before electricity, Japanese villages pressed perilla seeds for oil to light their homes. The crop served 3 functions simultaneously: food on the table, medicine in the cabinet, light in the darkness. But here is what matters most for survival. Perilla self-seeds with a ferocity that borders on aggression. A single plant produces between 1,000 and 4,000 seeds. 85% of those seeds will germinate. They remain viable in soil for 5 years or longer. Plant perilla once during one good season. The next spring, it returns without permission. The spring after that, it returns again, and again, and again. Korean farming villages have documented perilla patches growing on the same land for 10 generations. No replanting, no purchasing new seed. The crop simply continues. In agricultural terms, this is called naturalization. In practical terms, this is permanent food infrastructure. One decision by one ancestor feeds descendants for centuries. The leaves contain 3.9 grams of protein per 100 grams of fresh weight. This exceeds spinach. This exceeds kale. This exceeds most leafy greens that Western nutritionists celebrate. The calcium content reaches 230 milligrams. The iron content reaches 1.7 milligrams. Vitamin A concentration hits 5,520 international units. The leaves provide a complete nutritional package from a plant that requires no annual replanting. But the seeds hold the real treasure. In 1991, researchers at the National Institute of Nutrition in India analyzed perilla seed oil. They found alpha-linolenic acid concentrations between 54 and 64%. Alpha-linolenic acid is the plant form of omega-3 fatty acids. 64%. No other plant on Earth comes close. Flaxseed oil contains 53% omega-3. Nutritionists celebrate flaxseed as a superfood. Chia seed oil contains 58%. Health food stores charge premium prices, but perilla seed oil contains 64%, the highest concentration ever measured in any plant species, and almost no one in the Western world has ever heard of it. This gap requires explanation. In the 1970s, Danish researchers traveled to Greenland to study Inuit populations. They noticed something remarkable. Despite eating enormous amounts of fat, the Inuit had extremely low rates of heart disease. The researchers identified omega-3 fatty acids as the protective factor. Fish consumption became the explanation. Fish oil became the solution. By 1980, the supplement industry saw opportunity. Fish oil capsules entered the market. Marketing campaigns taught Western consumers that omega-3 came from fish. The message was simple: eat fish, take fish oil, protect your heart. By 2024, the global omega-3 supplement market reached $4 billion annually. Fish oil dominates this market. Krill oil captures the premium segment. Algae oil serves the vegetarian niche. Every product requires industrial processing, extraction, purification, encapsulation, quality control, cold chain shipping. The complexity creates barriers to entry, and the barriers protect profit margins. Now consider perilla. The seeds can be cold-pressed with hand tools. No industrial facility required. No patents possible on the pressing of a seed. No extraction technology to license. No capsule formulation to protect. A farmer with a wooden press can produce omega-3 oil in a backyard shed. A crop that self-seeds cannot generate repeat seed sales. A product that requires no processing cannot generate processing revenue. Perilla threatens every link in the supplement supply chain. Search PubMed, the database of medical research. Type fish oil omega-3. You will find more than 15,000 studies. Now type perilla oil omega-3. You will find 400 studies. The ratio is 37:1. This is not because fish oil works better. This is because fish oil has funding. The research gap is not accidental. Fish oil studies receive industry sponsorship. Supplement companies fund trials that support their products. Perilla research receives almost no Western industry funding. The studies that exist come primarily from Korean government institutions, Japanese universities, and Chinese research hospitals. The knowledge exists, but it exists in languages that Western databases historically ignored. Until the 2000s, major medical databases systematically under-indexed research published in Asian languages. A study published in Korean might as well not exist for American physicians. A breakthrough documented in Japanese reached no Western audience. The translation barrier functioned as an information wall, 2,000 years of knowledge on one side, $4 billion of industry on the other. The Dongbibogam sat untranslated for 386 years. During those centuries, Western medicine developed entirely without access to Korean pharmaceutical knowledge. Perilla documentation filled those pages. Western doctors never saw it. Western researchers never cited it. Western consumers never learned. Consider what modern research has finally confirmed. In 2003, Japanese researchers published a clinical trial in the Annals of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. They gave perilla extract to patients with seasonal allergies. The treatment group experienced 50% reduction in allergic symptoms, 50%, from an herb that grows like a weed. The active compound is rosmarinic acid. Perilla contains more rosmarinic acid than any other culinary herb ever tested. More than rosemary despite the name, more than basil, more than oregano, Rosmarinic acid reduces inflammation through mechanisms that pharmaceutical researchers have studied for decades. The compound inhibits enzymes that trigger allergic responses. The science is clear. The applications are documented. The plant remains unknown. In 2004, researchers published findings on perilla and cancer prevention. The compounds in perilla leaves inhibited tumor growth in laboratory studies. The specific agent was perillaldehyde, a molecule found almost exclusively in this plant. The research appeared in Biofactors, a respected peer-reviewed journal. Western oncologists did not notice. Western cancer patients did not learn. In 2010, Korean researchers studied diabetic patients consuming perilla leaf extract. Blood sugar levels after meals dropped by 23%. 23% reduction in postprandial glucose from a leaf that self-seeds in any backyard garden. The pharmaceutical industry sells drugs for this exact purpose. Perilla does it for free. The pattern becomes visible. Every benefit that perilla provides threatens an existing industry. Omega-3 supplements, allergy medications, blood sugar drugs, and anti-inflammatory treatments. Each category represents billions in annual revenue. Each could be partially replaced by a plant that costs nothing after the first planting. This is not conspiracy. This is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that would make those products unnecessary. Universities pursue grants from available sources. Those sources favor patentable interventions. A self-seeding plant cannot be patented. A cold-pressed oil cannot be protected. The funding flows elsewhere. The research follows the funding. The knowledge gaps persist. The seed industry reveals the same structure. Globally, farmers spend $60 billion annually on seeds. Corn, soy, wheat, cotton, all are annual crops, all requiring new seed purchases every planting season. The business model depends on repetition. Farmers must buy again and again and again. Perilla breaks this model. Buy seed once, plant once, harvest forever. Every spring, the previous year's dropped seeds germinate without permission. The crop expands. The farmer's costs disappear. A permanent food supply establishes itself. No corporation benefits from this transaction. No quarterly earnings improve. No shareholder value increases. The same pattern appeared with white clover. For 80 years, American lawn seed contained clover because clover fertilizes soil for free. Then herbicide manufacturers needed peacetime markets. They removed clover from seed mixes. They sold poison to kill what they had previously sold as beneficial. 3 generations later, homeowners pay for fertilizer that clover would have provided at no cost. Perilla faced no such active campaign. No company deliberately suppressed it. The mechanism was simpler. Neglect. A plant that generates no repeat revenue generates no marketing budget. A crop that needs no inputs needs no input suppliers. The system that promotes profitable plants simply ignored the profitable ones. But the plant waited. It always waits. Perilla has grown in Asia for 2,000 years. It survived dynastic collapses. It survived wars. It survived industrialization. It survived being ignored by the most powerful food system in human history. And it is still there, still growing, still producing 64% omega-3 in its seeds. You can grow it yourself. Perilla thrives in USDA zones 4 through 10. This covers most of the continental United States and equivalent climates in Europe. The plant tolerates poor soil. It tolerates drought once established. It tolerates neglect. These are the characteristics of a survival crop. Plant seeds directly in soil after the last frost date, or start them indoors 6 weeks earlier. Space plants 12 inches apart, though they tolerate crowding. Water occasionally during establishment. After the first season, water becomes optional. The plant adapts to local rainfall. Harvest leaves throughout the growing season. They taste like a combination of mint and basil with hints of anise. Eat them fresh in salads. Wrap them around grilled meat. Add them to soups. Dry them for tea. The options match Asian cuisines that have explored this plant for millennia. In fall, allow some plants to flower. The flower spikes produce thousands of seeds. Let them drop. Let them scatter. Let them establish next year's crop without any action from you. This is the self-seeding promise. One planting becomes a permanent presence. Collect excess seeds for oil production. Small hand presses cost less than $100. Cold pressing extracts oil without damaging the omega-3 content. One harvest provides a year of omega-3 supplementation. No capsules, no fish, no industry, just a backyard in patience. The seeds also store indefinitely when kept dry. Traditional Korean households maintain seed supplies for years. The emergency value is obvious. If supply chains fail, if stores close, if industrial systems collapse, the seeds in your shed still grow. The plant still self-seeds. The omega-3 still reaches 64%. This is what resilience looks like, not bunkers and freeze-dried meals, not supplements shipped from factories across oceans. Resilience is a plant that returns every spring without asking. A plant that feeds you, provides medicine, and replants itself while you sleep. The question was never why did Asia hide this herb. Asia did not hide anything. Korean grandmothers wrap meat in perilla leaves at every family dinner. Japanese restaurants serve shiso with every piece of raw fish. Chinese medicine shops stock dried perilla on open shelves. The knowledge was always there, always public, always available. The question is why Western systems failed to notice. Why 15,000 studies on fish oil and 400 on perilla oil? Why $4 billion spent on supplements that a backyard garden could replace? Why 64% omega-3 content remained unknown to populations spending premium prices for 53% alternatives? The answer is not conspiracy. The answer is structure. Economic systems see what benefits economic systems. Research follows funding. Funding follows patents. Patents require control. Perilla cannot be controlled. It self-seeds. It spreads. It naturalizes. It becomes wild. It becomes free. What cannot be owned cannot be sold. What cannot be sold cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter consciousness. 3 generations of Westerners grew up without ever hearing the word perilla. Not because anyone hid it, because no one profited from revealing it. But you know now. You know that the highest omega-3 plant exists. You know that it self-seeds forever. You know that 500 million people eat it weekly. You know that modern research validates ancient applications. You know that you can grow it in most climates with minimal effort. You know that one planting creates permanent food infrastructure. The seed companies will not tell you. The supplement industry will not tell you. The medical establishment will not tell you. The information threatens too many revenue streams. But the plant does not care about revenue streams. It cares about reproduction. It cares about spreading. It cares about establishing itself wherever soil and sunlight permit. For 2,000 years, perilla has pursued this single agenda. It will continue for 2,000 more. Walk into any Korean restaurant tonight. Look past the grilled meat. Look past the kimchi. Focus on the small side dishes arranged across the table. Among them, you will find tiny kidney-shaped leaves with scalloped edges. Most Western visitors ignore them. Some assume decoration. Others push them aside for familiar flavors. This is Centella asiatica. In English, we call it gotu kola. 500 million people across Asia eat it every single week. In Thailand, street vendors blend these leaves into bright green smoothies each morning. Office workers in Bangkok grab them on the way to work. They call it bua bok. The drink costs less than $1. The brain benefits have been known for generations. In Sri Lanka, children learn a proverb before they learn arithmetic. 2 leaves a day keeps old age away. Grandmothers repeat it. Parents enforce it. The leaves appear at breakfast. They appear at dinner. The practice continues without question because the results speak across generations. In India, Ayurvedic practitioners call it Brahmi or Mandukaparni. They have prescribed it for cognitive enhancement since before written history. The documentation spans 3,000 years. The applications remain unchanged. Memory, focus, mental clarity, longevity. Here is the first clue that something went wrong in Western knowledge systems. You know ginseng. Health food stores stock it prominently. You know turmeric. Golden milk lattes appear in every coffee shop. You know ashwagandha. Supplement companies market it aggressively. But gotu kola, consumed by more people than all those herbs combined, barely registers in Western consciousness. Most Americans cannot identify it. Most Europeans have never heard the name. The problem begins with fragmentation. Koreans call it byongpul, meaning bottle herb. Japanese call it tsubokusa. Chinese call it jishui kao, meaning snow accumulating grass. Thai speakers say bua bok. Hindi speakers say brahmi, though this name creates confusion because another plant shares it. Vietnamese use a different name entirely. Botanists settled on Centella asiatica, but this Latin classification never reached popular awareness. 7 names for one plant. No unified identity in Western languages. When a plant has no consistent name, it has no consistent presence in research databases. It has no consistent presence in cookbooks. It has no consistent presence in public awareness. The fragmentation was not deliberate, but the result was systematic erasure from Western knowledge. The ancient record tells a completely different story. In India, around the 6th century BCE, a surgeon named Sushruta compiled the Sushruta Samhita. This is the oldest surviving surgical text in human history. It predates Hippocrates by 200 years. Within its pages, Sushruta documented a classification system for medicinal herbs. He designated certain plants as Medya Rasayana. This Sanskrit term translates to mind rejuvenator. Only 4 plants in all of Ayurvedic medicine received this classification. 4 plants out of thousands evaluated across centuries. Gotu kola was one of the 4. This is not folk medicine. This is not grandmother wisdom. This is documented pharmaceutical classification from a medical tradition that invented surgical techniques still used today. 400 years later, around the 2nd century CE, scholars compiled the Charaka Samhita. This encyclopedia expanded on Sushruta's work. The text specifies dosage for gotu kola. It details preparation methods. It lists contraindications. It describes expected outcomes. The level of clinical documentation matches modern pharmaceutical standards. Western medicine would not achieve comparable rigor for another 1,700 years. In China, physicians integrated gotu kola into their pharmacopoeia independently. They used it for clearing heat and for promoting wound healing. They documented cognitive benefits in elderly patients. Their records parallel Indian findings, without any evidence of communication between the traditions. 2 civilizations, 2 independent conclusions, the same plant, the same benefits. In Korea, the physician Heo-jun completed the Dongui Bogam in 1613. This encyclopedia synthesized Korean medical knowledge accumulated across centuries. Gotu kola appears in its pages. The text recommends it for cognitive decline and mental fatigue. The Dongguibagam guided Korean physicians for 400 years. Western scholars did not translate it until 1999. 386 years of medical knowledge locked behind a language barrier. But the most compelling evidence does not come from ancient texts. It comes from elephants. Sri Lankan elephants live 70 years or longer. Their memory is legendary. Researchers have documented elephants returning to water sources they visited only once, decades earlier. They remember individual humans across 30-year separations. Their cognitive longevity exceeds almost every other land mammal. Sri Lankan naturalists observed something peculiar across generations. Wild elephants deliberately seek out and consume gotu kola. They will bypass other vegetation to reach patches of this specific plant. They consume large quantities. They return repeatedly. The behavior appears intentional rather than incidental. Western zoologists dismissed this observation for decades. They called it folklore. They called it confirmation bias. They called it anthropomorphization. The elephants, lacking the ability to publish peer-reviewed papers, continued eating gotu kola regardless of scientific opinion. Then, in 2005, a researcher named Amala Sumyanath at Oregon Health and Science University decided to investigate what the elephants already knew. She obtained gotu kola extract and applied it to rat neurons in laboratory conditions. She measured the results. The neurons grew new dendrites. Dendrites are the branching structures that allow brain cells to communicate with each other. More dendrites means more connections, and more connections means better cognitive function. The extract increased dendritic length by 40% compared to control groups from a plant that elephants select instinctively. Dr. Sumyanath published her findings in the Journal of Pharmacy and Pharmacology. The paper documented exactly what Sri Lankan grandmothers had claimed for centuries. The herb stimulates neural growth, and the mechanism was no longer mysterious. The compound asiatic acid crosses the blood-brain barrier. Once inside neural tissue, it triggers production of nerve growth factor. Nerve growth factor tells neurons to extend new dendrites. The brain literally rebuilds its communication network. This was not new information. This was Western confirmation of 3,000-year-old knowledge. The elephants knew, the Ayurvedic physicians knew, the Korean doctors knew, the Thai street vendors knew. Dr. Sumyanath translated this knowledge into terms that Western institutions would recognize. But the 2005 study was only the beginning. In 2018, Dr. Nora Gray at the same university published research that made the timeline concrete. She worked with aged mice whose cognitive function had declined measurably, and their brains showed the deterioration typical of aging mammals. She gave them water extract of Centella asiatica. Within 14 days, the mice showed measurable improvement in cognitive tests. Not months, not years, just 14 days. Dr. Gray analyzed what changed at the cellular level. The extract increased expression of genes responsible for mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the power plants inside every cell. They generate the energy that neurons need to function. In aging brains, mitochondrial function declines, energy production drops, neural communication slows, and cognition fades. The gotu kola extract reversed this decline. The cellular power plants reactivated and energy production increased. The aged mice began performing cognitive tasks like younger mice. The paper appeared in Frontiers in Aging Neuroscience. The 14-day timeline entered scientific literature. Consider what this means in practical terms. Your brain contains approximately 86 billion neurons. Each neuron connects to thousands of other neurons through dendrites. The total number of connections reaches 100 trillion. This network constitutes everything you are: your memories, your personality, your ability to think, reason, and imagine. As you age, this network degrades, dendrites shrink, and connections weaken. The communication infrastructure that defines your identity slowly deteriorates. This process underlies age-related cognitive decline and dementia. This is the fating that families witness in elderly loved ones. Pharmaceutical companies have spent billions trying to slow this process. Alzheimer's drugs generate $4.3 billion in annual revenue. The medications manage symptoms. They do not reverse underlying damage, they do not regrow dendrites, and they do not rebuild connections. They maintain function temporarily while decline continues. A plant that Sri Lankan elephants eat voluntarily triggers dendritic growth within 14 days. The implications should have transformed neuroscience. They did not. The research continued quietly. In 2008, a Thai researcher named Jintanaporn Watanathorn conducted human trials, not mouse studies, not cell cultures, actual human trials with real people. The participants were healthy elderly volunteers. They received Centella asiatica extract daily for 2 months. Researchers measured their cognitive function before and after. The results showed significant improvement in working memory and significant improvement in overall cognitive function. The participants reported no serious adverse effects. The study appeared in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology. Human beings, not mice, demonstrated measurable cognitive enhancement from an herb that costs nothing to grow. The same year, researchers published findings on gotu kola and Alzheimer's disease specifically. Beta amyloid plaques are the hallmark of Alzheimer's. These protein deposits accumulate in brain tissue. They poison neurons and destroy cognitive function. They represent the central target of Alzheimer's drug development. Tawari and colleagues demonstrated that Centella asiatica extract reduced beta amyloid toxicity in neurons. The plant protected brain cells from the specific damage that causes dementia. The paper appeared in the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease, a peer-reviewed publication dedicated to this condition, and it acknowledged a plant-based intervention that pharmaceutical development had ignored. Understand clearly what the science documents. Gotu kola triggers growth of new neural connections. Gotu kola enhances cognitive function in healthy elderly humans. Gotu kola protects neurons from Alzheimer's-related damage. Gotu kola produces measurable effects within 14 days. The research is not theoretical. The research is not preliminary. The research spans decades, continents, and methodologies. Now answer this question honestly. Before watching this video, had you ever heard any of this information? Had any doctor mentioned it? Had any news outlet reported it? Had any health organization recommended investigation? The silence is the story. Search PubMed, the authoritative database of medical research. Enter donepezil Alzheimer's. Donepezil is the generic name for Aricept, a patented Alzheimer's drug. The search returns more than 4,000 studies. Now enter Centella Asiatica Cognition. The search returns approximately 200 studies. The ratio is 20:1. 20 times more research on a patented pharmaceutical than on a plant with 3,000 years of documented use. This ratio does not reflect relative effectiveness. This ratio reflects relative funding. The global nootropics market reached $10.7 billion in 2021. Projections estimate $29.2 billion by 2028. This market depends on products that require manufacturing, products that require patents, products that require distribution networks, products that generate ongoing revenue through repeat purchases. Gotu Kola breaks every requirement of this business model. The plant spreads by runners, similar to strawberries. One plant becomes 10 plants in a single growing season. 10 plants become 100 the following year. 100 plants become 1,000. The math is relentless. Buy once, never buy again. The active compounds cannot be patented. Asiatic acid exists in nature. Madecassoside exists in nature. No corporation can claim ownership of molecules that evolved over millions of years. Without patent protection, no company can justify marketing investment. Without marketing investment, no public awareness develops. Without public awareness, no demand materializes. The structure of capitalism made this plant invisible. No conspiracy was necessary. No secret meetings occurred. No industry executives coordinated suppression. The economic system simply ignored what it could not monetize. Research funding flows toward patentable interventions. Universities pursue grants from pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies fund studies on pharmaceutical products. The cycle excludes anything that threatens the cycle. Compare this to fish oil. The omega-3 supplement market generates $4 billion annually. Fish oil requires industrial fishing, industrial processing, quality control, cold chain distribution, encapsulation, branding, marketing, retail placement. Every step generates revenue. Every step creates jobs. Every step involves companies that fund research supporting their products. Gotu Kola requires a pot of soil and occasional watering. The economic contribution to industrial systems approaches zero. The research funding follows accordingly. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout botanical medicine. Plants that heal without generating revenue remain unstudied. Plants that cannot be patented remain unpromoted. The knowledge exists in traditional systems worldwide. The validation exists in peer-reviewed journals. The public awareness does not exist because awareness requires investment, and investment requires return. The translation barrier reinforced this erasure. Until the 2000s, major medical databases systematically under-indexed research published in Asian languages. A study published in Korean might as well not exist for American physicians. A breakthrough documented in Japanese reached no Western audience. The Donguibogam sat untranslated for 386 years. Centuries of accumulated knowledge were blocked by linguistic barriers that economic incentives never motivated anyone to cross. But the plant does not understand economics. The plant does not respect patent law. The plant simply grows. Gotu Kola thrives in USDA hardiness zones 8 through 11. This covers the American South from Texas to Florida to California. In these climates, the plant survives winter outdoors. It spreads continuously. It naturalizes permanently. One planting becomes a forever supply. In zones 4 through 7, covering most of the continental United States, Gotu Kola grows as a warm season plant. Start it indoors in early spring. Transplant after frost. Danger passes. Harvest throughout summer. The plant prefers partial shade because it evolved on forest floors. It likes consistent moisture but tolerates drought once established. It asks almost nothing and provides continuously. The traditional Sri Lankan dose is 2 leaves daily. This matches the proverb, 2 leaves a day keeps old age away. The The leaves taste slightly bitter with grassy undertones. Some people eat them directly, others add them to salads. Thai cuisine blends them into smoothies with fruit to mask the bitterness. Korean preparation incorporates the leaves into banchan, the small side dishes accompanying every meal. The leaves appear raw and fresh. They appear pickled. They appear blanched. The cuisine developed dozens of methods across centuries because the culture recognized the value and committed to consumption. For standardized dosing, clinical trials used extracts containing 60 milligrams of triterpenes daily. Triterpenes include asiaticoside and madecassoside, the primary active compounds. Supplement capsules typically provide this concentration, but the supplements cost money monthly, while the plant costs money once. Consider the geometry of self-sufficiency. A single gotu kola plant from a nursery costs $5 to $10. Within one growing season, that plant produces runners. Each runner generates a new plant. 20 new plants emerge from one original. The following season, those 20 become 400. The season after that, 400 become 8,000. The mathematics overwhelm any subscription model. Your brain contains the most complex structure in the known universe. 86 billion neurons, 100 trillion connections, the seat of consciousness itself. Pharmaceutical companies offer to maintain this structure for monthly fees. The fees continue until death. The decline continues despite the fees. A plant that Asian grandmothers have eaten for 3,000 years offers to enhance this structure for the cost of a single purchase. The plant then multiplies. The cost amortizes towards zero. The brain benefits accumulate. The elephants of Sri Lanka have eaten gotu kola since before humans walked upright. They live 7 decades. Their memories span generations. They never consulted a pharmaceutical representative. They never evaluated clinical trial data. They never calculated cost per dose. They simply ate what the forest provided. The forest provided what their brains required. Western science spent a century building an industry around cognitive enhancement. Billions of dollars flow through laboratories and manufacturing plants and distribution networks and retail pharmacies. The industry employs thousands. The industry funds research. The industry shapes public understanding of what helps brains function. Parallel to this industry, a plant grows wild across 3 continents. It spreads from cuttings. It multiplies without assistance. It provides compounds that trigger neural growth within 14 days. The documentation spans 3 millennia, dozens of cultures, and hundreds of peer-reviewed publications. The industry did not hide this plant. The industry simply had no reason to mention it. What cannot be sold cannot be marketed. What cannot be marketed does not enter awareness. 3 generations of Westerners grew up without ever hearing the name gotu kola. Not because anyone lied, because telling the truth generated no profit. But you know now. You know that the highest concentration of neural growth factors exists in a plant. You know that the plant self-propagates endlessly. You know that 500 million people consume it weekly. You know that modern research validates ancient applications. You know that 14 days produces measurable change. You know that one purchase creates permanent supply. The pharmaceutical industry will not tell you this. They sell monthly subscriptions to cognitive maintenance. The supplement industry will not emphasize this. They sell capsules of what you could grow in a windowsill pot. The medical establishment will not prescribe this. They operate within systems that recognize only patented interventions. The elephants will not tell you either. They lack the language, but they demonstrate the answer every day in forests across Sri Lanka. They seek out specific plants. They consume them deliberately. They live 7 decades with memories intact. The behavior requires no explanation. The results speak across species. You can wait for an industry to validate what elephants have demonstrated for millennia. You can wait for institutions to recommend what 3,000 years of documentation already supports. You can wait for someone to profit from telling you what this video just shared for free. Or you can plant something this spring. You can watch it spread through summer. You can harvest leaves through autumn. You can know, as Korean grandmothers know, as Thai street vendors know, as Sri Lankan elephants know, that the brain rebuilds itself when given the right materials. The research exists. The plant exists. The knowledge now exists in your awareness. What happens next is simply a choice. Walk into any soba restaurant in Tokyo tonight. Watch the chef pull fresh noodles from boiling water. Those noodles are not made from wheat. They are made from the seeds of a flowering plant in the same family as rhubarb, a plant called buckwheat. The Japanese have eaten these noodles for over 1,000 years. Buddhist monks in mountain temples noticed something. The people who ate buckwheat regularly kept their skin firm into old age. They documented this in texts that Western researchers never translated. In Russia, every grandmother knows how to make kasha. Kasha is buckwheat groats, toasted until fragrant, then simmered until tender. Russian families have eaten kasha for breakfast for 300 years. In the 1700s, physicians in the Volga region wrote observations in their journals. They noticed that populations that ate buckwheat showed different aging patterns than populations that ate wheat in the West. The skin stayed elastic longer, and the blood vessels stayed flexible. No one in Western Europe read those journals. In the mountains of Sichuan province in China, farmers grow a special variety called Tartary buckwheat. This variety contains rutin concentrations that reach 1,700 milligrams per 100 grams of flour. That is not a typo. 1,700 milligrams, the highest concentration ever measured in any common food. These mountain communities call it the longevity grain. They have called it that for centuries. Western nutrition databases still list it as a minor crop of limited interest. Here is the first thing you need to understand. Buckwheat is not wheat, and it is not related to wheat. It is not even in the same plant family as wheat. Wheat belongs to the grass family called Poaceae. Buckwheat belongs to the flowering plant family called Polygonaceae. This is the same family that includes rhubarb and sorrel. The evolutionary distance between buckwheat and wheat is greater than the distance between a dog and a dolphin. The name buckwheat comes from the Dutch word boekweit. Boekweit literally means beech wheat. In the 1500s, Dutch traders noticed that buckwheat seeds look similar to beech tree nuts. They used the word wheat loosely to mean any grain-like seed. That naming accident created a century of confusion. People with celiac disease avoided buckwheat because they thought it contained gluten. It does not. People with wheat allergies feared buckwheat because of its name, and they had no reason to fear it. The consequences of this naming error extend into modern medicine. Doctors who should know better still warn gluten-sensitive patients away from buckwheat. Nutritionists who should have studied the research still classify buckwheat alongside wheat in their recommendations. The name became a prison. The plant remained trapped inside a false identity for generations. Now, let me tell you about rutin. Rutin is a flavonoid compound. Flavonoids are plant chemicals that protect both the plant and the person who eats it. Rutin specifically protects blood vessels and skin tissue. It does this by inhibiting enzymes called matrix metalloproteinases. Researchers call them MMPs. Your body produces MMPs naturally. They break down collagen. This is normal. This is part of tissue remodeling. But here is the problem. As you age, MMP activity increases. The enzymes start breaking down collagen faster than your body can rebuild it. Sun exposure accelerates MMP activity. Pollution accelerates it. Stress accelerates it. The result is wrinkles, sagging skin, and weakened blood vessels. The collagen supplement industry exists because of this problem. They sell you collagen peptides to replace what the MMPs destroyed. Rutin offers a different solution. Instead of replacing collagen after destruction, rutin inhibits the enzymes that destroy collagen in the first place. A study published in the Journal of Cosmetic Dermatology in 2019 tested this directly. Researchers gave rutin to human subjects for 8 weeks. The treatment group showed significant improvement in skin elasticity. Wrinkle depth decreased measurably. The mechanism was MMP inhibition. Another study published in Phytotherapy Research in 2018 went further. Researchers exposed human dermal fibroblasts to buckwheat extract in laboratory conditions. Fibroblasts are the cells that produce collagen in your skin. The buckwheat extract increased type 1 collagen synthesis by 35% compared to controls. Here is where the 3-day window comes from. Research published in the European Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences in 2020 tracked rutin absorption in human subjects. Rutin from buckwheat reaches peak plasma concentration within 2 to 4 hours of consumption. The compound does not stay in your blood. It accumulates in tissues including skin. This accumulation continues over 48 to 72 hours of consistent consumption. A clinical study published in Nutrients in 2021 measured this directly. Participants consumed buckwheat daily for 72 hours. Researchers measured transepidermal water loss, a clinical marker for skin barrier function. The buckwheat group showed 18% improvement in skin hydration metrics within 3 days. The traditional observations from Buddhist monks and Russian physicians were correct. They simply lacked the instruments to measure what they observed. Let me take you back 8,000 years. Archaeologists working in the Yangtze River Valley in China excavated a site called Luojiabang in Zhejiang province. They found pollen samples preserved in ancient soil layers. The pollen was from buckwheat plants. The dating was unambiguous. Farmers in this region cultivated buckwheat 6,000 years before the Common Era. This makes buckwheat one of the oldest domesticated crops in human history. The cultivation spread along trade routes. By 500 years before the Common Era, buckwheat grew across Central Asia. Traders carried seeds along what would later become the Silk Road. The plant proved remarkably adaptable. It grew in poor soils that rejected wheat. It matured in 70 to 90 days, allowing harvests in short growing seasons. It required no irrigation in most climates. For mountain communities and northern farmers, buckwheat was not a secondary crop. It was survival. In Japan, buckwheat arrived during the Nara period between 710 and 794 of the Common Era. Buddhist monks adopted it quickly. The monks observed dietary restrictions that limited their protein sources. Buckwheat provided complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids, in a form they could eat without violating their vows. The temples became centers of buckwheat cultivation and soba noodle making. The craft of soba making evolved over centuries. Different regions developed distinct styles. Shinshu soba from Nagano Prefecture, Izumo soba from Shimane Prefecture, Tokyo-style soba with its emphasis on texture and dipping sauces. Today, Japan consumes 115,000 metric tons of buckwheat annually. Soba restaurants operate in every city. The tradition never broke. In China, the scholar-physician Li Shizhen spent decades compiling the most comprehensive medical text of his era. He finished the Compendium of Materia Medica in 1578. This text documented thousands of medicinal substances used in Chinese medicine. Buckwheat appears in its pages with specific applications. Li Shizhen wrote that buckwheat strengthens the sinews. He wrote that it restores youthful appearance to aging skin. He documented its effects on blood vessels and digestion. The compendium recorded observations that would echo for centuries. The language is historical. The observations are precise. Strengthening sinews means supporting connective tissue. Restoring youthful appearance means protecting skin elasticity. These are descriptions of collagen support, written 450 years before Western researchers identified rutin as an inhibitor of matrix metalloproteinases. Li Shizhen did not know the mechanism. He documented the result. In Russia, buckwheat became the defining staple of national cuisine. Kasha appears on tables from St. Petersburg to Vladivostok. Catherine the Great, who ruled from 1762 to 1796, promoted buckwheat cultivation as state agricultural policy. She understood that a crop which grew in poor soil and short seasons could feed populations that wheat could not reach. Soviet nutritional researchers in the 1960s conducted studies on buckwheat eating populations. They documented cardiovascular benefits that Western researchers would not confirm for another 40 years. The studies were published in Russian. They appeared in Soviet scientific journals. Western databases did not index Soviet research during the Cold War. The knowledge existed. It existed behind a language barrier that functioned as an information wall. In France, the region of Brittany developed its own buckwheat tradition. Galettes are buckwheat crepes, thin and crispy, filled with cheese or eggs or ham. Breton farmers grew buckwheat for centuries. The rocky soil of Brittany rejected wheat, but accepted buckwheat. The galette became regional identity. But something changed in the 1800s. Wheat became a prestige grain. White bread became a status symbol. The Industrial Revolution created factory systems optimized for wheat processing, roller mills, commercial bakeries, and distribution networks. The infrastructure investment locked in wheat advantage across Western Europe. Buckwheat could not make bread. The lack of gluten means buckwheat flour will not rise. It will not hold gas bubbles from yeast, and it cannot produce the soft loaves that urban consumers learned to prefer. The limitation was technical. The consequence was cultural. Buckwheat became peasant food, and the association hardened over generations. By 1900, educated Europeans considered buckwheat a relic of poverty. The erasure accelerated in the 20th century. Industrial agriculture measured success by yield per hectare. Wheat produces 3 to 4 tons per hectare under optimal conditions. Buckwheat produces 1 to 1.5 tons per hectare at maximum. The math appeared to favor wheat, but the calculation measured only volume. It ignored nutrient density completely. 100 grams of buckwheat flour contains 13 grams of protein with all essential amino acids. 100 grams of wheat flour contains 10 grams of protein, and it is low in lysine. Lysine is critical for collagen synthesis. Wheat cannot provide it in sufficient quantities, but yield calculations do not measure amino acid profiles. They measure tons per hectare, and that metric determined the outcome. The research funding gap reveals the structural bias. Search PubMed, the United States National Library of Medicine database. Type wheat into the search field. You will find over 145,000 published studies. Now type buckwheat. You will find 3,800 studies. The ratio is 38:1. This ratio does not reflect relative nutritional importance. It reflects relative economic importance to industries that fund research. Wheat breeding programs receive billions of dollars globally. Monsanto and Bayer and Syngenta invest in wheat genetics. Buckwheat improvement programs receive virtually no private funding. A crop that thrives without inputs attracts no input suppliers. A plant that needs no pesticides attracts no pesticide companies. A seed that farmers can save and replant attracts no seed companies. The collagen supplement industry reached $4.9 billion in global revenue in 2023. Marine collagen comes from fish. Bovine collagen comes from cattle. Chicken collagen comes from poultry. Synthetic collagen peptides come from laboratories. Every product requires industrial processing, extraction, hydrolysis, purification, encapsulation, quality control, and cold chain shipping. The complexity creates profit margins. The margins justify marketing budgets. The marketing teaches consumers that collagen must come from supplements. Now consider buckwheat. The rutin that inhibits collagen destruction comes in the whole food. No extraction required, no hydrolysis required, no encapsulation required. A farmer with buckwheat flour is not a customer for the supplement industry. A farmer with buckwheat flour is competition. The threat is structural. A patent cannot protect buckwheat. The plant has existed for 8,000 years. Prior art defeats any patent claim. A trademark cannot restrict buckwheat. The name belongs to common usage. Regulatory capture cannot limit buckwheat. It is food. The barriers that protect supplement industry profits do not apply to whole foods that consumers can grow themselves. The research gap is not conspiracy. It is economics. Companies fund research that supports their products. They do not fund research that makes their products unnecessary. Universities pursue grants from available funding sources. The available sources favor patentable interventions. Buckwheat is not patentable. The funding flows to other projects. The knowledge gaps persist. Let me show you what buckwheat actually contains. Analysis published in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry in 2015 measured rutin concentrations across common foods. Common buckwheat contains between 12 and 36 milligrams of rutin per gram of flour, depending on variety and growing conditions. Tartary. Buckwheat contains up to 170 milligrams per gram. Compare this to wheat flour, which contains effectively zero rutin, and to oat flour, which contains trace amounts below detection thresholds. Buckwheat stands alone. The protein quality matches the rutin advantage. Research from Cornell University published in 1989 analyzed buckwheat protein digestibility. The biological value reached 93%. This means 93% of the protein you consume from buckwheat becomes available to your body. Eggs score 94%. Buckwheat nearly matches eggs for protein quality while providing rutin that eggs cannot provide. The amino acid profile explains why vegetarian populations across Asia relied on buckwheat for centuries. Lysine concentration reaches 5.8 grams per 100 grams of protein. Lysine is the limiting amino acid in most grain-based diets. It is also essential for collagen synthesis. Your body cannot make collagen without adequate lysine. Wheat provides inadequate lysine. Buckwheat provides abundant lysine. The glycemic index of buckwheat measures 54. This classifies as low glycemic. Blood sugar rises slowly after buckwheat consumption. A meta-analysis published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology in 2016 reviewed 23 studies on buckwheat and blood glucose. The pooled analysis showed 19% reduction in blood glucose levels among buckwheat consumers compared to wheat consumers, 19%, without medication. From food, the same meta-analysis documented cardiovascular benefits. Serum cholesterol dropped by 26% in buckwheat-consuming populations. The mechanism involves both rutin and other flavonoids, including quercetin and orientin. These compounds work synergistically. Isolated supplements cannot replicate the complexity of whole food chemistry. Research published in Circulation in 2008 identified another mechanism. Rutin inhibits an enzyme called protein disulfide isomerase, often abbreviated PDI. PDI is required for blood clot formation. Excessive clotting causes strokes and heart attacks. Rutin provides natural anticoagulation without the bleeding risks of pharmaceutical blood thinners. Russian physicians in the 1700s observed reduced cardiovascular disease without understanding why. Modern research explains their observations. You can access these benefits starting today. Buckwheat is available in multiple forms. Whole groats are the intact seeds with the hulls removed. Kasha is groats that have been toasted before packaging. The toasting adds nutty flavor but reduces some routine content through heat exposure. Green buckwheat is raw, untoasted groats with maximum routine preservation. Buckwheat flour works in pancakes, crepes, and quick breads. It will not make risen loaves alone, but it combines well with other flours. Soba noodles provide buckwheat in a convenient form, so read labels carefully. Many commercial soba noodles contain mostly wheat flour, with small percentages of buckwheat. Look for full buckwheat soba or Niju Wari soba for full benefits. The 3-day protocol is simple. In the morning, cook buckwheat groats as porridge with berries and seeds. The berries add vitamin C, which enhances rutin absorption. For lunch, have soba noodles with vegetables and a protein. The traditional Japanese preparation includes dipping sauce and wasabi. For dinner, serve buckwheat groats as a side dish, replacing rice or wheat. Consistency matters more than quantity. One serving daily helps maintain tissue accumulation of rutin. The 72-hour window that researchers documented reflects initial accumulation. Ongoing consumption maintains protective levels. You are not taking a supplement. You are building food infrastructure. Growing buckwheat requires minimal expertise. The plant tolerates poor soil that other crops reject. It actually improves soil through its root action, making it an excellent cover crop for gardens. Plant seeds directly in the soil after the last frost. Scatter thickly. Buckwheat germinates within days. The dense growth crowds out weeds without herbicides. 70 to 90 days after planting, the plants produce small white flowers. Bees love buckwheat flowers. If you keep bees or want to support wild pollinators, buckwheat provides excellent forage. After flowering, seeds develop within their papery hulls. Let plants dry in the field. Harvest by cutting stalks and threshing seeds free. Storage is simple. Whole groats keep for years in cool, dry conditions. Store in airtight containers away from light. Flour should be refrigerated or used within a few months, as the oils can go rancid, but groats last. A 25-pound bag in your pantry represents weeks of meals and complete independence from supplement supply chains. The price comparison reveals the absurdity of the current system. Buckwheat groats cost roughly $2 to $3 per pound in bulk. A collagen supplement providing similar skin support costs $30 to $50 for a 1-month supply. The supplement requires industrial processing, global shipping, and retail markup. The buckwheat requires a pot and 20 minutes. Let me return to where we started. There is a plant that rebuilds collagen in 72 hours. This is not marketing. This is peer-reviewed research published in indexed journals. The mechanism is rutin inhibition of matrix metalloproteinases. The effect is increased collagen synthesis and decreased collagen degradation. The timeline is 72 hours for tissue accumulation. This plant contains 200 times more rutin than any true grain. This is not exaggeration. This is laboratory analysis published in agricultural chemistry journals. The concentrations in tartary buckwheat approach 1,700 milligrams per 100 grams. No other common food comes close. 8,000 years of human cultivation documented the benefits. Chinese physicians recorded skin restoration in the 1500s. Russian physicians observed cardiovascular protection in the 1700s. Japanese monks noticed maintained skin elasticity across lifetimes. The observations came from different continents in different centuries. They converged on the same conclusion. 3 billion people eat buckwheat today. Russia remains the world's largest producer. China and Ukraine and Kazakhstan produce millions of tons annually. Japan imports buckwheat to meet demand that domestic production cannot satisfy. The plant never disappeared. It simply disappeared from Western consciousness. The erasure happened through economics, not conspiracy. Wheat made money for seed companies and pesticide makers and bread factories. Buckwheat made money for no one but the people who ate it. The research funding followed the money. The nutrition education followed the research. The public understanding followed the education. 3 generations grew up without ever learning that the highest concentration of collagen-protecting compounds existed in a food they could grow in their backyard. You know now. You know that buckwheat is not wheat. You know that rutin inhibits the enzymes that destroy your collagen. You know that 72 hours of consistent consumption builds tissue concentrations. You know that the research exists, published and indexed and available. You know that the ancient observations were correct. Buckwheat does not need rehabilitation. It thrived for 8,000 years without Western approval. It will thrive for 8,000 more. The question is not whether buckwheat works. The science confirms it works. The question is who benefits when you do not know. Now you know. Walk into any pharmacy today. The supplement aisle displays calcium tablets priced at $15 to $30 per bottle. Caltrate, Citracol, Nature Made. These companies spend millions convincing consumers that laboratory formulations deliver superior bone health. Shoppers fill their carts, trusting that processed pills outperform anything growing in their backyards. They never question whether soldiers treating shattered bones in muddy field hospitals discovered something better 80 years ago. Stinging nettle grows on every continent except Antarctica. The plant reaches 4 feet tall in fertile soil, and it spreads through underground rhizomes that survive winter freezing. Most people recognize it through childhood pain, a brushed ankle in tall grass, or a grabbed handful while playing in overgrown lots. The burning sensation that follows contact can last for hours, and it creates memories that persist for decades. The sting mechanism operates through microscopic hollow hairs covering every leaf and stem. These structures, called trichomes, function like hypodermic needles. When skin contacts the plant, the hair tips break off and inject a chemical mixture directly into the tissue. Histamine triggers immediate inflammation. Acetylcholine amplifies nerve signals. Formic acid, the same compound fire ants deploy, creates the sustained burning sensation. This defense system evolved over millions of years for one purpose: protection. The same chemistry that drives humans away also repels insects and grazing animals. The plant invests enormous biological resources into these defensive compounds. That investment protected something valuable enough to justify the cost. Monastery records from the 9th century in Europe document what that value was. Benedictine monks at the Abbey of St. Gall in modern Switzerland maintained detailed garden plans showing nettle cultivation alongside medicinal herbs. The monks were not growing weeds by accident. They were cultivating a food source that sustained communities through winters when stored grain ran low. John Gerard published the Herbal in 1597, documenting English botanical knowledge accumulated over generations. His entry on nettle describes the plant as nourishing beyond measure in famine conditions. Gerard recorded that Scottish Highlanders survived harsh winters by harvesting nettle from sheltered valleys when other food sources failed completely. Irish records from the Great Famine of 1845 through 1852 show similar patterns. Families who knew traditional foraging methods incorporated nettle into soups and porridges when potato crops rotted in the fields. The plant grew abundantly in the same disturbed soils, where desperate farmers had torn up failed crops searching for anything edible. The British Ministry of Food issued official pamphlets during World War I encouraging civilians to harvest wild nettle. The documents archived at the Imperial War Museum in London describe collection methods and recipes designed to supplement ration diets. Government botanists understood that the plant growing along railway embankments and bomb craters contained nutrients that imported food could not provide. German military medical records from World War II contain the most detailed documentation. Field hospitals along the Eastern Front faced chronic supply shortages. Medical officers experimented with local food sources to support patient recovery. Dr. Heinrich Vogt, stationed near Stalingrad in 1943, observed that patients receiving nettle-based nutrition showed faster bone healing compared to control groups. His reports traveled through military medical channels to research facilities in Munich and Berlin. Laboratory analysis confirmed what field observation suggested. The plant contained calcium concentrations exceeding dairy products by factors that seemed impossible for a wild species. The research continued until Allied bombing disrupted German scientific infrastructure in 1944. After the war, this knowledge dispersed without systematic preservation. Agricultural extension services in Europe and North America focused reconstruction efforts on industrial farming methods. Governments needed to rebuild national food production quickly. Industrial methods required purchased inputs, fertilizers from chemical factories, seeds from commercial suppliers, and equipment from manufacturers. These purchases generated economic activity that helped fund post-war recovery. The self-sustaining, foraging knowledge passed down through generations generated no revenue for agricultural suppliers. Grandparents who remembered which wild plants fed families through hard times found their knowledge dismissed as primitive. Their grandchildren learned to buy vegetables wrapped in plastic from supermarket shelves. The chain of transmission broke within a single generation. The plant that fed Europe through every famine became classified as a noxious weed requiring elimination. County extension offices published guides for chemical eradication. Gardeners sprayed herbicides along fence lines where nettle appeared. The most nutritious food source in the temperate world became an enemy to destroy rather than a resource to harvest. But the scientific evidence never disappeared. It accumulated in peer-reviewed journals that most consumers never encounter. Researchers continued analyzing nettle composition using increasingly sophisticated laboratory methods. The findings confirm everything historical records suggested and reveal additional benefits that medieval monks could not have measured. Ruto and colleagues published a comprehensive nutritional analysis in Hort Science in 2013. Their laboratory work at the University of Kentucky measured mineral content in nettle leaves grown under controlled conditions. The calcium numbers exceeded expectations, 481 milligrams per 100 grams of dry weight. The same measurement for whole milk shows 125 milligrams. The ratio calculates to 3.8 times more calcium in nettle than in the dairy product that marketing campaigns promote as the superior bone-building food. The bioavailability question matters as much as raw content. Calcium locked in chemical compounds that human digestion cannot break down provides no nutritional benefit regardless of concentration. Roy Upton addressed this question in the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia monograph, published in 2013. His analysis of absorption studies showed nettle calcium entering the bloodstream at 40% efficiency. Dairy calcium absorbs at 30%. The plant delivers more calcium per serving, and the body accesses a higher percentage of what it delivers. 1 cup of cooked nettle provides more absorbable calcium than 2 glasses of milk. The mathematics are not complicated. They simply contradict 50 years of dairy industry marketing that most consumers accepted without question. Skeptics raise an obvious objection. People drink milk in liquid form. Who consumes dried nettle? The answer involves basic food chemistry. Cooking nettle in water for 60 seconds completely neutralizes the sting mechanism. Heat denatures the proteins in trichomes and breaks down the chemical irritants. The resulting cooked greens taste similar to spinach, with a slightly stronger mineral flavor. Every traditional nettle recipe, from the Scottish Highlands to German field hospitals, begins with brief cooking that transforms a painful weed into a palatable vegetable. The protein content surprised researchers as much as the calcium findings. Adhikari and colleagues published analysis in Food Chemistry in 2016, documenting protein concentration at 25 to 30% of dry weight. Context makes this number meaningful. Spinach contains 2.9% protein. Kale contains 4.3%. Soybeans, the foundation of plant-based protein products, contain 36%. Nettle approaches soybean levels while growing as an unwanted weed rather than a carefully cultivated crop. Amino acid profile analysis published by Rafajlovska in 2013 confirm nutritional completeness. Human bodies require 9 essential amino acids that internal chemistry cannot synthesize. These must come from dietary sources. Animal products typically provide complete amino acid profiles. Most plant foods lack 1 or more essential components. Nettle leaves contain all 9 essential amino acids in proportions that support human protein synthesis without supplementation. Medieval populations who survived protein scarcity through nettle consumption were not lucky. They were accessing a complete protein source that modern nutrition science would not fully characterize for another 8 centuries. The knowledge worked. The explanation came later. Iron content presents another contradiction to mainstream nutrition education. Every child who watched cartoons in the 1970s learned that spinach builds strength through iron content. Popeye squeezed cans and grew instant muscles. The image persists in cultural memory decades after nutritional science complicated the story. Fresh spinach contains 2.7 milligrams of iron per 100 grams. Nettle contains 1.64 milligrams per 100 grams fresh. The numbers seem comparable until methodology differences emerge. Dried nettle concentrates to 41 milligrams per 100 grams. More importantly, the oxalate compounds in spinach bind iron molecules into forms that human digestion cannot absorb. Studies show that spinach iron passes through the digestive system largely untouched. Nettle contains lower oxalate concentrations. The iron molecules remain available for absorption into the bloodstream. Practical nutritional value depends on what the body can actually use rather than what laboratory analysis measures in raw samples. Vitamin K content adds another dimension. USDA Food Data Central databases show nettle providing 498 micrograms per 100 grams. Adult daily requirements fall between 90 and 120 micrograms. A single serving exceeds requirements by 400%. Vitamin K enables calcium deposition into the bone matrix. The combination of high calcium and high vitamin K in a single food source explains the accelerated bone healing that German military physicians observed in field hospital patients. The question becomes obvious once the data accumulates. Why does a plant that humans classify as a worthless weed contain more nutrition than crops that farmers cultivate carefully and consumers pay premium prices to purchase? The answer involves evolutionary pressure and agricultural history. Wild plants face constant survival challenges. Insects attack leaves. Animals graze stems. Pathogens invade tissues. Survival requires investment in defensive compounds and concentrated nutrients that support rapid tissue repair. Plants that cannot defend themselves and heal quickly do not reproduce successfully. Natural selection over millions of years concentrated beneficial compounds in species that survived. Cultivated crops face different selection pressures. Humans chose plants for characteristics that benefited farmers and merchants rather than consumers. Larger fruits attracted buyers at markets. Sweeter flavors please palates accustomed to sugar. Durable skins survived transport over long distances. Seeds that germinated uniformly simplified planting schedules. None of these selection criteria correlated with nutritional density. Researchers at the University of Texas published findings in the Journal of the American College of Nutrition documenting nutrient decline in commercial produce over 50 years. Modern tomatoes contain 60% less vitamin C than varieties grown in 1950. Broccoli calcium content dropped by half. The crops that fill supermarket shelves look impressive and taste acceptable while delivering diminished nutritional value with each passing decade. Nettle never underwent commercial selection, no seed company bred varieties for supermarket distribution, no agricultural extension service promoted cultivation methods optimized for mechanical harvest. The plant retained its original nutritional density because no economic force existed to breed it away. The same characteristic that prevented commercialization preserved the nutritional value that commercial crops lost. Greger and Landberg published research in Environmental Pollution in 2015 demonstrating additional nettle capabilities. The plant accumulates heavy metals from contaminated soils through a process called phytoremediation. Zinc and copper concentrate in root tissues while remaining absent from edible leaves. Nettle thrives in disturbed and polluted sites precisely because it evolved mechanisms to process soil contaminants that poison other vegetation. This explains why nettle appears abundantly in abandoned lots, former industrial sites, and roadsides where car exhaust settled for decades. The plant grows where agriculture degraded land because its biology handles conditions that cultivated crops cannot tolerate. The weed designation reflects human failure to recognize adaptation as valuable rather than any deficiency in the plant itself. Vogel and Hartle published agricultural research in the American Journal of Alternative Agriculture in 2023 documenting production potential. Nettle biomass reaches 10 to 15 tons of dry matter per hectare annually. This yield exceeds alfalfa, which farmers cultivate as the gold standard for biomass production. Nettle achieves these numbers without nitrogen fertilizer inputs because the plant accesses soil nitrogen through mechanisms that domesticated crops lack. DiVirgilio and colleagues confirmed establishment characteristics in industrial crops and products in 2015. Seeds germinate in 10 to 14 days under standard conditions. Plants reach harvestable size 8 weeks after emergence. Root systems persist 5 to 7 years once established. A single planting produces continuous harvests across multiple growing seasons without replanting costs or annual soil preparation. The economics of cultivation border on absurdity. Commercial calcium supplements cost $15 to $30 per month for consumers who take them daily. Annual expenditure reaches $180 to $360 per year for a single mineral that grows freely in backyard conditions. Milk purchases for equivalent calcium delivery cost approximately $180 per year at current retail prices. The plant that provides superior calcium at zero ongoing cost grows faster than gardeners can harvest it. Establishment requires minimal investment. Root divisions from existing patches cost nothing if you know someone willing to share. Online nurseries sell starter plants for $8 to $12. Seed packets containing hundreds of seeds retail for $3 to $5. A 10-square-foot patch produces 20 or more pounds of fresh greens annually once established. Health food stores price dried nettle at $12 to $18 per pound. The backyard patch generates $200 or more in equivalent retail value from plants that require no fertilizer and no irrigation beyond natural rainfall. Site selection follows simple principles. Nettle tolerates conditions that kill commercial vegetables. Partial shade where lawn grass struggles becomes ideal nettle habitat. Poorly drained corners where water pools after rain create exactly the moist conditions the plant prefers. The spots that frustrate conventional gardeners become productive nettle plots without soil amendment or drainage improvement. Planting technique requires no special knowledge. Root divisions spaced 12 inches apart and covered 2 inches deep establish within weeks. Water once after planting, then ignore it completely. The plant evolved to survive without human assistance. Providing careful attention offers no benefit and wastes gardening effort better directed elsewhere. First harvest begins when plants reach 12 inches tall. Cut the top 4 to 6 inches of each stem using scissors or pruning shears. The sting neutralizes within seconds of cutting as trichomes lose hydraulic pressure. Handling fresh cut nettle with bare hands causes no discomfort after 30 seconds exposure to air. Gloves provide psychological comfort but no practical necessity for harvested material. Processing for consumption takes 60 seconds. Drop cut nettle into boiling water. Wait 1 minute. Remove and drain. The heat destroys sting compounds completely and permanently. Cooked nettle stores in refrigerators for 1 week or freezers for 6 months. Dried nettle keeps indefinitely in sealed containers away from light and moisture. Traditional recipes span every European culinary tradition. Scottish nettle soup combines the greens with potatoes and onions into a hearty broth. Italian nettle risotto substitutes the leaves for spinach with a stronger mineral flavor. German nettle dumplings mix blanched leaves into potato dough before boiling. Every recipe that calls for cooked spinach accepts nettle substitution with enhanced nutritional delivery. Modern applications extend beyond traditional cooking. Nettle powder adds to smoothies without detectable flavor change. Dried leaves steep into tea that provides mineral supplementation in drinkable form. Capsules filled with dried nettle powder replicate the supplement industry model using backyard production rather than factory manufacturing. Continuous harvest through the growing season requires only repeated cutting. Each harvest stimulates regrowth from the root system. Plants cut in early spring produce new growth within 2 weeks. Cutting every 3 to 4 weeks maintains steady production from last frost through first frost. A single established patch provides fresh nettle for 8 months and dried nettle for the remaining 4 months. The German military physician whose findings disappeared into archives was not given access to secret knowledge. He was given desperation that forced attention to resources growing freely around destroyed infrastructure. The same conditions exist today in a different form. Rising supplement prices and declining produce nutrition create circumstances where rediscovering traditional knowledge provides practical benefit. Agricultural extension services have no commercial incentive to promote plants that grow without purchased inputs. The funding structures that support public education about farming connect directly to companies selling seeds, fertilizers, and equipment. Nettle cultivation generates no revenue for these suppliers. The knowledge remains buried not through conspiracy, but through economic structures that reward some information and ignore other information regardless of value to consumers. The peer-reviewed research sits in university libraries accessible to anyone willing to search. The historical records fill archives open to public access. The plants grow along roadsides, in abandoned lots, and at the edges of parking areas throughout the temperate world. Every gardener who pulls nettle and bags it for disposal removes the highest calcium food source that grows in their climate. The monks at St. Gall understood something that modern consumers forgot. The soldiers in field hospitals rediscovered something that peacetime prosperity obscured. The science confirms what traditional knowledge preserved. The most nutritious food requires no purchase, no cultivation, and no attention beyond recognizing value, where industrial agriculture taught us to see only weeds. 64% omega-3, more calcium than milk, protein that feeds nations, neurons reborn in days. The industries profit from scarcity. These plants never hid, we just refused to see.